Hello and welcome to another one of these videos I'm calling my office hours, where I basically take a break from the usual stuff we do on this channel like lyric analysis and poetry analysis, and instead just sort of talk about kind of anything, but usually it's been either video game or movie reviews. It's kind of fun just talking about these pieces of art without doing full analysis in terms of what we do with other stuff. But anyway, this weekend I had the joy of getting to see two really interesting movies, One Battle After Another, and then The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. So I should have previously just uploaded my whole review discussion on One Battle After Another. So as I mentioned in that one, this is sort of the part two, even though they're totally unrelated, The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. So just sort of want to give my first impressions. I just walked out of this movie, and yeah. All right, so I am unfortunately a little low on time tonight, so I'm going to try to keep this a bit quicker than normal, so it might seem a bit more high energy or sporadic, but that might be fun. So yeah, this movie, where to start? So I guess I should mention I will be making some comparisons to Wolf Children and Summer Wars. So there will be some mild spoilers for those movies, mostly through comparison to this movie. I also want to say this review will include, heavy spoilers for The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. So my spoiler-free review is that you should definitely go out and see this movie, stream it, whatever, and see it before it gets spoiled for you if you haven't seen it yet, because it's really, really good. And I would hate for it to be spoiled for you before you actually got to experience it yourself. So yeah, that's my little spoiler-free review, but there should be enough time to have clicked off of the video if you wanted to avoid spoilers, so I think we can now jump into it. So, where to start with this movie? I just want to say I basically consider it to be, a complete masterpiece, as I do with Wolf Children and a little bit less or so at Summer Wars, but I'm becoming a huge fan of this studio. Wolf Children is one of I think the best movies I've ever seen. I think it genuinely is a complete masterpiece where I would have no notes, no criticisms for that one. I have a little bit of a criticism for the movie we're going to discuss today, but we'll get into that later. If you love the anime Nichijou, I think you would really like this, because I feel like the protagonist of this movie, Makoto, is a lot like Yuki in Nichijou. So the first part of this movie, the first fourth to third to even really half, I really felt like I was just sort of watching like a spin-off of Nichijou where Yuki gets her own movie, because their personalities and their sort of penchant for getting into really unfortunate and unlucky circumstances were identical throughout, and similarly they're both such likable characters. Makoto in this is the protagonist, and she's one of the most likable and sort of huggable protagonists I've seen in a really, really long time. She's, funny and clever, but also makes a ton of mistakes that are really relatable and understandable. I feel like normally sometimes you see protagonists making mistakes and you get so frustrated and they kind of become, hateable. While with this one, that was not the case. Any sort of mistakes that were made, or any sort of problems that arose based on her actions and decisions felt totally relatable and understandable, and as a result, I never felt like I got frustrated with the character. I'm one of those people who tends to get really frustrated when characters make foolish or narcissistic decisions and things like that. So seeing a character who goes through all these issues and obstacles and definitely makes mistakes, but seeing them go through all that and never being frustrated with them was such a breath of fresh air. And I also have to credit, the art design for her was great. The animation, she had so much life where how she and how she moved about. There's like a great scene of her like rolling over on her bed, which was just like really funny, and it's repeated twice where she just sort of does this spin move. And also, as she's leaping through time, she's basically like constantly like rolling and spinning and falling, and all together it just creates like a great sort of like comedy by action, sort of like a physical comedy. And it was great. And also her animation again was like very lively. Her art design, she looked just cute, and just like, again, like a very like huggable, fun character that you just want to cheer on. But also the voice acting was so good. Such a great range of going from like total devastation and sobbing and crying and frustrated and angry and shy and embarrassed and flustered, to also just having great like comedic timing when she gets frustrated with trying to do her whole time leaping ability to try to fix situations. So the voice acting was just phenomenal in this. And so for this review, I watched the subtitled one. So I'm referring to the original Japanese voice acting rather than the dub. I don't know if the dub's good or not. This is my first time seeing this movie. But I really wanted to. I felt like it was some of the best voice acting I've seen in a long time. The music was amazing, and they're always really good. The music in Wolf Children and Summer Wars, but especially Wolf Children, is some of the best music I've seen in movies, and this movie really stood up to that as well. And the plot was just really fascinating. So basically it's about this high school girl who has a really rough bad luck day that ends up with her getting hit by a train, but then she's able to leap backward in time, seemingly by like magic, and she discovers that she has this ability to leap back in time, and she can do it seemingly as much as she wants. And so she's able to do all sorts of fun things that kids would do, where she wants to keep doing karaoke and wants it to be stretched out longer and longer. So she just keeps looping time backwards until she does it for like 10 hours straight. She keeps going back to try to get her allowance. So she's able to double her amount of allowance because she keeps getting handed say $10, and then she gets it again. But the lore is that she gets to keep the original $10. So it grows and grows and grows. And she also then uses it to get out of awkward social circumstances, to do better on her tests, and also to get her out of dangerous situations. But as she does it, she starts to realize that there's sort of a limit to how many times she can do it. And that starts to create this sense of dramatic tension, because once you realize there's a limit, she has to make sure she ends on a good iteration where she hasn't messed things up even worse, because sometimes she'll mess something up, go back in time, and keep working at it until she gets an outcome she likes. But ultimately, she runs out of the times, and it's revealed that this other character, who is sort of a kind of romance interest / just, seemingly loyal friend, is actually a time traveler from the future, who's gone back here to see this piece of artwork that Makoto's aunt just happens to be restoring. But he lost his tech that made it so he could go back to the future. And that's because Makoto accidentally drained the machine, and that's how she's been able to do all of these time loops. But she realizes too late that she sort of has feelings for this other individual. But then, since he used his last going back in time reset to save her friends and his friends, she actually ends up still having one of her go back in times, because in the reality that he created, she hadn't used her last go back in time. So she goes back in time, meets up with him. They sort of confess their feelings, but only sort of. And then he promises that, he'll basically be waiting for her in the future, and says come find me in the future. I'll be waiting. And then it ends. So one of the parts that I was the most interested in was there's this really great and very like complicated plot point in which initially the other boy confesses to her, and then she sort of keeps going back in time until he doesn't confess. So she knows, but he doesn't. He doesn't think that he's confessed in this timeline because he hasn't, but she knows that he has feelings for her. But since she orchestrated events, so it'd be a reality where he doesn't, this other girl starts to, which I think her name is Yuki, she starts to develop a relationship with him, and they start to want to go on a date. The thing is Makoto is friends with Yuki, and so she doesn't want to hurt Yuki's feelings, but she also starts to get jealous of this relationship, even though initially she was like, no, there's no way I see him and me together, and that's why she, avoids the confession. But it creates this really interesting dynamic where she keeps bumping into him, and he doesn't understand why she's acting like something is weird or awkward or wrong. But she can't help herself because she, knows all this context that he doesn't know. And then meanwhile, her friend and him are starting to get closer and closer, and she's getting jealous. So it creates this really interesting dramatic tension where you have to ask yourself, okay, is she going to go back in time once again to let him confess so this little blip doesn't occur, but then she'll technically have been manipulating him because she would have orchestrated this confession without him knowing, and she would have been pulling him away from Yuki, and in the process also have been hurting her friend Yuki's feelings, because even if Yuki doesn't remember that she was getting closer to him, she already has affection for him at the start of this whole timeline. So she would be betraying both of her friends effectively, but then she'd be getting what her heart wants, but she didn't realize wanted, which is the sort of relationship with this guy. So for the longest time of the movie, this is sort of the main dramatic irony, or tension, I should say. And then as you see that there's a limit to the amount of times, there's also other things like this one student is starting to get progressively bullied more and more because she keeps kind of throwing stuff his way, so that it doesn't come her way. And so you're expecting her to basically eventually fix things with this kid so he's not getting bullied, fix things with the relationship between another girl and her other guy friend. But how is she going to fix this relationship where it doesn't feel like she's being cruel to Yuki and doesn't feel like she's manipulating, her love interest, but still gets to get with him? And so you're like, and there's a limited amount of time, so she has to do it right. But ultimately, it goes in a totally different direction. So basically, her other guy friend is riding a bike, and he's with this girl who has a crush on him, but they're riding the bike that she was riding in the very beginning, and basically the events are set in such a way that they're going to get hit by the train instead of her. She thinks she stops the train event, but doesn't. But in the moment that she thinks she stopped it, she uses her final time because the other guy asks her about if she's doing time travel, and she goes back in time to avoid that conversation. But then right after that, she sees her friends heading towards the train. So that's when it's then revealed that instead this other guy uses his final time to save her friends, but then he has to disappear. But by him doing that, she actually gets one more go back in time. She uses that to, reconvene with him and sort of set the record straight. Now, my one issue is that it's not really an issue with the story. I'm not criticizing the story when I say this, but I was super disappointed that he didn't stay in the present. And the reason that is because he describes that the future is like really bleak. he didn't realize that the sky could be so big. He had never seen crowds as big as he had seen in the city here. They don't have baseball. They don't have this artwork. It's been destroyed. So it's clearly like a sort of dystopian / post-apocalyptic future that he lives in. And so it's weird that he goes back to this terrible future, considering that he was enjoying the present so much, and if he stayed in the present, he would get to stay with Makoto, so they could be together, he could enjoy the blue skies, and avoid the horrors that await in the future. So it was just sort of frustrating seeing these two people that are in a romance arc not really be together, or at least not for now. The other thing that's sort of rough is all time travel plots always get a little messy and a little complicated. And in this one, it feels a little complicated because if he is, say, 16 and he's traveled back into the past, and then he goes into his present, which is the future, he's going to still be 16 in the future, but Makoto, in order to catch up with him and be in the future, is going to have to age significantly. So say it's 30 years, she's going to be 30 years older, but he's still going to be 16 in his present. So the relationship isn't going to really work out that way. Alternatively, if the events are going to happen in, say, 2 years, that suddenly puts the future into such a horrible state. It's just really bleak knowing that Makoto is going to experience basically like a complete apocalyptic disaster that's going to change the world so much that it's going to be in this bleak way that he knows it. And there's also sort of the weird timeline thing of like, if he's from the future, but it's not so far in the future that she can't link up, like since she will eventually catch up and he'll be waiting in the future, that means that it can't be further in the future than her own lifespan, which means that she actually already exists in the future / his present as, let's say, a 30-year-old woman, which means that by the time he actually goes back into her past, she will then have met him, gone into his present, and should know about him before he even goes into the past, because by going into her past, in her past she meets him, and then, you know, when their times sync up, she already knows about him, even if he doesn't, because he hasn't gone into the past yet. So that part of the timeline's a little messy. The other thing that sort of bugs me is we've seen this sort of story arc in other stories, and I won't bring any up, so I'm not spoiling anything specifically, but there will sometimes be a story arc where it's basically like there's two lovers, and one of them has some sort of advantage over the other. Maybe they're a vampire, maybe they're immortal, maybe they're a time traveler in a different scenario, and basically the person who has the advantage over the other will eventually say something along the lines of like, well, I have to go back to my home because it's not fair to you for me to stay. The longer I stay here, the less you get to experience your normal organic life, or the longer I stay here, the more lifeblood is drained from you, or something like that. And so they're forced to be separated, basically because that's what's right for A and more just and stuff like that. The thing is in this scenario, A's entire life experience is only made better by the presence of her friend and romantic interest, who's B. And he has such a terrible future to go to that him leaving, it's bad for him, it's bad for her, and him being here doesn't like mess up the timelines or anything. They don't ever get into anything about, oh, if he stays, her timeline will get all messed up and it's bad for her. They never cover that. So it leaves you being like, why couldn't he have stayed? I was fully expecting it to be that he ultimately stays. There's a scene where he pulls her close, and that's when he says, basically like, come find me in the future. I'll be waiting for you, or something like that. And I was expecting that moment to be that he pulls her in for a kiss, and then it fades to black and then fades back in, and you see all of the friends are playing baseball, and maybe she says something along the lines of like, are you sure it's okay that you're staying in the present? And he says something like, oh yeah, I'm perfectly happy right here and now. Time waits for no one, because that's like a phrase they keep repeating the whole movie. So instead it ends with him leaving, going into the future, and then it ends with her playing baseball with her friends and sort of looking off into the distance, sort of hopeful for the day they'll meet again. But as I just covered, I feel like that reunion is going to be bleak, either because it's so far in the future or because it means some really bad stuff's going to happen really, really soon. So yeah, I was a little disappointed by the ending. I feel like Wolf Children, for example, without getting into the ending, was just like the perfect ending for that story. So, and Summer Wars also had a pretty perfect ending for the story. And so for this one, I just felt like the perfect ending was right there. But I'm sort of rambling at this point. Just wanted to also say that again with the animation, it's kind of an interesting style where sometimes the people look like they're drawn a bit more rougher than the backdrop scenery, but it's like in a really cool artistic way. And again, the movement has so much life to it. And there's also some like really cool abstract scenes, like when she's going back in time, and there's like water droplets, and as she's dying, and it's just like all these like cool abstract imagery. And again, the imagery of this like red line of time as it's running forward and backward, and then this like space she enters as she goes back in time. All of it was just really, really, really cool. So if I had to review this movie, where I would give Wolf Children a 10 out of 10, I'm going to have to give this one a 9 out of 10, just because I personally was not crazy with the ending, because one, it was frustrating, and two, because of the implications of time travel, I felt like it's a bit more messy than it initially implies. But like I said, I'm a bit short on time, so I'm going to wrap it up there. If you guys liked this, please let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more of these movie reviews. I'm always watching movies, so I definitely could make a lot more of these. I have a lot of fun doing this. And if you've seen this movie, please let me know what your thoughts are. Did you interpret things in the ending differently than me? Did you like the sort of them separating? And if so, I'd love to hear why, get some different perspective on it. But yeah, and also, don't forget to subscribe. It helps grow this channel. And I feel like this is the sort of community that really benefits from more people. It means more discussion in the comments, which means getting more perspective and different angles and different takes and all of that. So yeah, with that said, I'm going to sign off here. So hope you guys all have a great rest of your night. Bye.